Hello, I'm Dylan,
And I'm Keon.
and this is Triple Play, that podcast that's 4.5 hours of vehicular manslaughter, because this time we watched Mad Max.
Written by George Miller, James McCausland, Byron Kennedy, Terry Hayes, Brian Hannant, Nico Lathuris, Brendan McCarthy, and no one else. That's it.
Directed by George Miller. And I believe the third one was co-directed by George Ogilvy. Ogilvy? I'm not actually sure how to pronounce it.
And released in 1979, 1981, and 1985.
So we're back. Season 4 of Triple Play. Can you believe this is the fourth damn season of this thing?
Yeah, we're hanging by a thread.
Well, yeah. I mean, yes. More true than perhaps we would like to admit.
But we're reinvigorating that thread. We're weaving in new threads to strengthen it.
Well, perhaps we should explain the metaphor for those of us who are a little lost in this train of thought. Basically, I think that we season 3 of Triple Play, and specifically recording the final 2 episodes of Triple Play season 3 that we recorded, which were not the final 2 chronologically released. We kind of realized, or I realized, I won't speak for Keon, but I realized that the format for Triple Play was getting a little stale, and just wasn't as interesting as I think it was when we did it originally. And not only that, to me, the concept of Triple Play was that we watched the movie trilogy in one day, and that was like, in hindsight, that's not like a high concept for a podcast. With marathoning a trilogy and then talking about it on the podcast, and that kind of got lost when we moved into COVID quarantine, which I believe pretty much probably all of the season will be recorded in quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
And so to that end, before recording today, we have decided to make a few changes structurally to the show a little bit.
Right. We also, I think, kind of became a little disillusioned with what we were actually doing. I mean, over the years, and it started this way, but I think, again, we leaned into it more heavily over the years where we would, go in depth on the production and stuff, but we really weren't, doing anything, I feel, other than like kind of regurgitating information that's just readily available on Google. So we definitely wanted to kind of bring back how we originally conceived this podcast back in 2015 of like, really going into a deep dive of like how these work as a trilogy and how they kind of all mesh together and just that.
Yeah, so to that end, moving forward with this episode, this season, potentially along this experiment, we're going to be trying to focus more on the movies themselves rather than the productions. We'll still be talking about production. We're going to mention a few things we found cool or interesting, and then mention, well, at least I'm going to mention what my sources were, and we'll link them in the show notes if people want to read more. Because I think also, like, coming to the realization, especially with like Lord of the Rings and The Godfather, we were never going to be an extensive, all-encompassing source for this behind-the-scenes information. No. And to attempt to do so was
folly.
Folly. The folly of man. So the structure is going to remain roughly the same. We'll talk about the movies in order, 1, 2, and then 3. But we're going to focus more on what we liked about the movie, what kind of themes or ideas or characters we took from the movie that we enjoyed, with behind the scenes smattered in, and then end the episode by talking about the trilogy as a whole, the 3 movies as a whole, actually, because with this format, at least I'm hoping that we'll be able to do now more thematic trilogies, more conceptual trilogies that aren't necessarily like, this is 3 movies that were released as a series, because now the show is more about the movies rather than the fact that it's like, oh great, we watched the entirety of the Mad Max franchise except for Fury Road, like, let's go. Woohoo.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see how it goes. And hopefully people like the changes to the show. Hopefully it's enjoyable for the listeners, because I think this also will allow us more discussion and more tangents, yes, but banter is what I want to say, more back and forth. Because the other thing about just regurgitating all of the behind the scenes is that there's not really like a back and forth discussion. It's just, here's a thing, and that's it. And then like I'll say, here's a thing, and then Keon will be like, well, here's another thing, and that was it. Like that was the whole podcast.
And hopefully this new format will also I guess inspire people to reach out more, to email us more and stuff like that. Because we get, we actually do get a fair number of emails and comments on our other podcasts, Trust Your Doctor, Doctor Who podcast, Zenith the Blake 7 podcast, and Inevitable Classic Sci-Fi podcast. Check those out. Oh, God.
There's a lot. That's a lot.
So hopefully we'll be getting more correspondence on this one as well.
Yeah, I would like to have more correspondence with people about the things we watch in this show, because this is the show that allows us to expand beyond the horizons of just like science fiction, which is what pretty much all of our other shows cover. Science fiction and fantasy and horror to an extent, but this is where we get things like comedies and actual drama and so on and so forth. Hopefully to that end, I'll have come up with a new intro and outro music for the Triple Play podcast, because in all honesty, I was never actually fully satisfied with the music I chose back in 2015. I just never really wanted to change it because there wasn't any reason to, but I think with this regeneration of the show, shall we speak, it seems an apt time to do that.
Yeah, I guess you'll have already heard it in this episode. I mean, I don't know what it's going to be yet.
We'll see. We'll see when I'm editing it what I come up with.
Just the number one like hit sync. Just use licensed music, whatever the number one single is that week.
Tina Turner's "We Don't Need Any More Heroes," Thunderdome, from the credits to Beyond Thunderdome. But before we go too much further, perhaps we should mention what movies we're planning on doing for this season of Triple Play. And Keon, you're the one with the master list, so I'm going to hand it over to you.
Well, this might come as a shock, but we're actually doing Mad Max first, so that is one. So after we're going to be doing Beverly Hills Chihuahua. yeah. Then we're going to be doing The Dark Knight. 50 Shades of Grey. I forgot that one was on the list. God damn.
Oh shoot, we're doing that this season? Yep. I totally forgot. Yep. Oh no.
How to Train Your Dragon, and then the Da Vinci Code.
I feel like 50 Shades of Grey will be the last one we record this season, just hypothetically speaking, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. But that's neither here nor there. Actually, the only thing that is here and not there on that list is Mad Max, which is what we're about to dive into. Yeah,
so the Mad Max trilogy is one that I haven't seen before, but I've always wanted to, because I watched Mad Max Fury Road, which came out in 2015, and I watched it, I believe it was December of 2016, or maybe it was 2017 that I finally got around to watching it, and it was awesome. Well, I really liked it. It's not everyone's cup of tea. You know, if you don't like an hour and 45-minute long car chase, you won't like Mad Max Fury Road.
Yeah, which I don't.
But I thought it was really good.
Yeah, it's no secret. Maybe it is a secret to people listening to this, but it's no secret, at least to Dylan, that I don't really like action scenes and that I zone them out most of the time, which is why a lot of these, the trilogy kind of didn't land for me. But yeah, I hadn't seen these before. But I've always heard that Fury Road was amazing. I remember when it came out in 2015, people were just, going on and on about Fury Road and how it's like the best thing ever. But I never watched it, so.
It is definitely like a spectacle movie. Like it's if nothing else, even if you don't enjoy the action, you don't enjoy the plot, Fury Road is definitely like a very impressive movie to watch, because it's pretty much all practical effects. It's done amazingly well, and it's just really like technically impressive to watch. And that's part of the reason why I think Fury Road landed. And it was interesting watching this trilogy, and as we're going to get into when we get to Mad Max 2, Road Warrior is definitely like the prototype for what Fury Road would become.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I definitely heard about Fury Road, is that it's it's what the original, or I guess what I've heard was that like Road Warrior was what the original was supposed to be, and then like Fury Road was what the Road Warrior was supposed to be.
I mean, I definitely can see that, and I guess that's a good segue into talking about the first movie, because the first movie was made on like a shoestring budget of basically nothing.
Right. And so George Miller wasn't he was a doctor, you know, when he first ideated Mad Max, he was a doctor. Which is a very sort of odd career change, I think. Like, you know, he's now known as a director first and foremost.
Right.
He was a practicing physician back then.
And not only is he known as a director, he's known as a very good director.
Yeah.
A lot of the references I looked up for this episode compared him to Sergio Leone, because he's very he likes to be a very visual storyteller. He doesn't use a lot of dialogue in his movies. I'm going to mention here that one of the sources that I looked at for this episode, that I think anybody who's interested in both the history of Mad Max and the second two movies in the trilogy, but also how Mad Max basically begins the new age of Australian cinema, is there's a PhD dissertation. I believe it's about 319 pages long, which is really long. But I mean, it's a PhD dissertation, and it's 339 actually. Sorry, and not all of it is about Mad Max, but it is about like George Miller and what's his name, Kennedy. Byron Kennedy, his partner in creating these movies, and basically how they created this new wave of Australian cinema, which I think is the most influential thing that Mad Max is, the first one, is known for. And I'll link the dissertation in the show notes, obviously, for anyone who's interested. It's super interesting because it breaks down like how Miller is as a director, what he does. That's one of the places that compared him to Sergio Leone, talking about his visual storytelling and how that influences Australian cinema for the next like 2 decades.
Mm-hmm. And that was also a very intentional move on his part. I think the original concept of Mad Max was a silent film with sound. I think is the paraphrase, I guess, of what it was.
Yeah, that's the exact description I think George Miller himself gave of the movie.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, that definitely comes across on screen, more so in Road Warrior than 1 and 3. But definitely to a big extent in all of them, I think. Because even the first one, the dialogue is mostly just punctuation. Like, you know, at the beginning scene, the beginning car chase, the dialogue is almost just like punctuation for the action that's going on. It's not really... Like, you can take out all the, you know, not all, but like you can take out some of the, you know, cursing and stuff like that, and it's, you know, the yelling, and I guess it all kind of meshes together to create this, like, very, very near future dystopia.
Yeah, and like you said, that comes across more in Road Warrior, but I think what's interesting about that and what I like about it is that it feels like the cars in the action sequence is like the main character almost. Like the cars themselves are the main characters and the people in the cars are just vehicles, through which the plot is being delivered, but the cars are the actual set pieces. You know, whether you like action or not, I think that's like Road Warrior is definitely like about the cars, essentially.
Yeah, and maybe that has something to do with the dystopian feel of the first one, despite like not having the dystopian landscapes of 2 and 3. Is like, I mean, it's like the people are almost like the action is like very, it's dehuman. It's the car, like, yeah, the cars are the actors, right? It's the action is dehumanized. It's the people again are just sort of vehicles for which the machines, you know, are on screen or whatever.
Right, and Miller even basically plays that up in like the opening chase sequence, because there's a scene where there's a car in the middle of the road and the family that's driving the car gets out of the car to go talk to someone on the side of the road, and then basically that family is completely irrelevant to the to the actual chase scene from then on, except for the baby who's in the road, and it's their car that gets destroyed. That's actually the focus of the chase scene when it comes through that part of town.
Mm-hmm. And that's something George Miller actually said as well, is like one of the big inspirations for Mad Max was the car crashes he witnessed as a child. Apparently he witnessed a few, I guess.
Yeah, the dissertation I mentioned, it sources a lot of like first-hand interviews that were done with Miller and Byron Kennedy and other producers on the movie. And apparently there used to be a radio reporter in Australia who every night would go and interview people who had been involved in car crashes. Like every night he would interview victims of car crashes. And one night he went to go interview people, and who should he go interview but his own son, who had been in a car crash that evening. And the radio was like, "We don't have to go through with this if you don't want. Like, it's your son. Like, you should go be with him." And the guy insisted they go through with it, and that like almost dispassion for your own kin is what inspired Miller when he was writing the character of Max, or creating the character of Max, to basically be almost devoid of attachment to his wife and his kid. Even though they're there in the movie, it feels like he's very much insular from them.
Huh. Yeah, I didn't necessarily get that, but I guess I can see it.
It's something that like my roommate and because I watched all three of these back to back with my roommate, and he's a huge film guy. He's in the arts with his degree, and he knows a metric crap ton
is
about
he like
movies.
A film? Like you keep mentioning him. Is he like a film studies? Like what is?
He doesn't do film studies, but he has TA'd and taught classes in film as part of his degree. He does art history.
Okay, cool.
But we were talking because he's like, I don't care about the wife like at all, because it feels when you're watching the movie, it really does, and he put the words together that I couldn't. That the wife is just there to make you care about Max. Like, she's just there to get killed off later on so that Max has a reason to go seek revenge on Toe Grabber, or whatever his name was.
Yeah, people in these movies had names, but I don't know what they were.
But that's again with the dehumanization thing, is that like they're given names in the credits and the title sequences, but the only character whose name we really know throughout all three trilogies is Max. Yeah. And Goose in the first movie was the only one I picked up, but like Max is really the only one whose name ever really gets said on screen. Everyone else you just get through the credits, either before or after the movie. Yeah, and
that's only in the first one. And in the second and third one, he's just like, in the second one, he's the road warrior to these people. And the third one, whatever his title was in the third one, I forget. The
Raggedy Man.
Yeah, Raggedy Man. But then they have something at the end too, where it's like, it's a very direct reference to Road Warrior, where it's like, and that's the legend of the blank, and it wasn't Road Warrior, it was something else.
And that's also a very Sergio Leone thing, right? Because Clint Eastwood's character never got a name. They never even called him anything in the movies. He's the man without a name, and that's basically what Max is. He's like the modern version of Clint Eastwood's character almost.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I can see that for sure.
Which is something that Miller didn't even realize when he was writing the movie, because apparently he didn't realize how much Max fit into this hero archetype until he moved to LA to make Road Warrior.
Yeah.
And he started taking acting classes himself.
Yeah. That's something that we'll get into, I think, in a bit, because there's definitely stuff to be said there for the stuff he looked up in Road Warrior. But like, yeah, he'd never, as a doctor, like he'd never, I guess, really written a script or tried to create a movie or anything. But okay, so this was actually funny. What I found out was that he just looked at American film and said that, like, wow, looks like all the most successful screenwriters in the U.S. Started out as journalists, so he decided to hire a journalist.
Yeah, so this story is actually a little more interesting than you're making it out to be, and I want to explain it because it's actually, the similarities between him and Orson Welles are quite interesting. Because basically what it is he reads this article or this novel length essay, which to me that's just a novel, but sure.
Yeah, book, a nonfiction book. Yeah.
Called Raising Cain. And so Raising Cain was an essay by film critic Pauline Kael, written in 1971. And basically in this essay, she asserts that Herman J. Mankiewicz wrote the entirety of Citizen Kane, and that Orson Welles didn't contribute to the film. Citizen Kane is a movie that on screen is credited to both Mankiewicz and Orson Welles equally, and it's generally accepted by most film scholars that the two of them did co-write the movie, that they each contributed approximately an equal amount to the movie. But basically, Herman J. Mankiewicz was a journalist before becoming a screenwriter. George Miller read the Raising Cain essay, and instead of coming away from it being like, Mankiewicz wrote Orson Welles' masterpiece Citizen Kane, he came away with it, well, the best screenwriters are journalists, so I'll hire a journalist. Yeah. But the similarities go further than that, and it's almost eerie, because Orson Welles, when he made Citizen Kane, was a theater director and had never made a movie before. So basically what he did was he sat down with just all the movies that were like famous at the time and watched all of them and just picked things he liked from them and put them into Citizen Kane. And George Miller and who did he hire to write the screenplay
James,
with them?
McCausland, I think is.
McCausland. Yeah. Him and McCausland sat down, watched a bunch of movies they liked, and picked things that they really liked to put in their screenplay.
Yeah.
Allegedly, Miller contributed pretty much all of the visual storytelling to the screenplay, whereas McCausland wrote all the dialogue. Mm-hmm. Very similar to, although the authorship of Citizen Kane is still, I guess, somewhat of an open question, I think it's generally accepted that Welles contributed the story outline as well as basically all of the linking scenes and everything, and Mankiewicz contributed most of the emotional beats. So, very interesting, the similarities between Miller and McCausland and Welles and Mankiewicz.
Yeah. Yeah, and even McCausland apparently had never written a screenplay before, which lines up with his, path in life, his career.
He was the Melbourne finance editor for the Australian Times before writing this movie.
But and apparently he didn't turn to any outside guidance. He didn't read anything about writing screenplays. He just kind of did it.
I actually think in a way that kind of makes the movie a little better, because it allows the movie to not actively avoid falling into tropes or becoming too tropey, but because the movie is ignorant of them, it never feels like it becomes tropey or cliche. The first one, anyway.
Yeah, there's a lot of that throughout history, actually, not just in movies, but in any form of art. Like there are these situations where it's like this group of amateurs got together and they had no idea what they were doing, and they created something that is now celebrated or whatever. Although the that's vastly outnumbered by group of amateurs gets together, produces garbage type thing. So it's not like
It's not a surefire recipe for success, is what you're saying?
Exactly.
Damn it.
Darn.
My method for painting the next Mona Lisa by not knowing anything about painting or visual, oil-based art. Foiled again.
Anyway, I mean, they needed more people to create this movie, so they did their casting call. They got Mel Gibson, who at the time was like a nobody, and I think had only been in one other movie before Mad Max.
Yeah, and that other movie he had done was while he was at acting school, like right after he graduated. Miller got him for Mad Max. Although I read that George Miller did go to America to potentially hire an international star for the movie, but realized that they had none of the budget to do that.
But it all worked out in the end because now Mel Gibson is an international star.
Yeah. I mean, for better or for worse, because he got into some serious controversy in the aughts, shall we, in that decade between 2000 and 2010.
Yeah, what was that about? I vaguely remember that.
Well, so the gist of it, and this actually ties into Beyond Thunderdome, was that Gibson was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Especially so apparently on the set of Beyond Thunderdome, which I have some stories to tell when we get there. And he was accused of beating his wife. They got divorced, and she basically said, yeah, he beat me.
Yeah.
There was a whole big thing. He was an alcoholic. He said some things that were racist.
Yeah, so he's just not a nice guy, like, all around.
No. No. And he was blacklisted in Hollywood for a long time after all of this came out. Because a lot of this came out in 2006, which I read up on this for this episode specifically, where Gibson got arrested for driving under the influence. And, I mean, after that, Hollywood was like, we probably shouldn't work with this guy. Most people didn't want to work with him. The only people who really worked with him after that were people who were his friends beforehand, until he made Hacksaw Ridge in 2016, which received Academy Award nominations and recognition. And then people were like, well, I guess like Gibson is all right now.
I guess if he'll make us money.
That's literally exactly what it is. Like, everyone in Hollywood was content to look the other way when Harvey Weinstein was sexually assaulting his subordinates.
Like literally everyone around him.
Because his movies made tons of money for Hollywood. But the instant it became public and like he was no longer making the money, they were like, yeah, we didn't like you anyway. We never liked you. Like, yeah, we were always against that. Like, Hollywood is very controversial and like very much like, I hesitate to use the word cesspool, but the cesspool of things like that. Mm-hmm. Same thing with like Roman Polanski. What's his name?
I have no idea what you're talking about. So
Roman Polanski, who pedophile. There's also Woody Allen, who married his adoptive daughter.
Yeah, it's really damn weird. It raises an eyebrow at least.
I actually don't think he adopted her. I think he married her mom. Her mom passed away. Then he married her. I think. Maybe she was his adopted daughter. I'm going to be honest. I don't actually remember the exact specifics of that incident. Also, he was accused of sexual abuse, but he still gets to make movies because they make money. So, again, like, if you make money, Hollywood loves you. This is not a podcast that's commenting on the current socio-political status of Hollywood, though.
No, we should take this back to the late 70s in Australia.
We should mention that it is relevant insofar as George Miller recasts the role of Max in the fourth movie away from Mel Gibson to Tom Hardy because of a lot of the controversy around Mel Gibson.
Yeah, and is that done as like is it just like, is there some in-universe explanation as to why he's different, or is he just Max now? Is that just
Tom Hardy's just Max? Miller basically said that the reason why he ended up recasting Max is because by the time they got the movie made, Mel Gibson was much older, and Miller wanted Max to be this not unaging
like James Bond
action hero-esque,
but
like a James Bond-esque, like he's always like this, not old, he's like younger, fit, mid-30s guy.
And that tracks what these movies are about, I think, because, you know, if not in one, like especially though with 2 and 3, like Max is sort of this legend, and, you know, people tell these stories about him, so it makes sense. Like, he kind of looks different to everyone, or like type thing. Yeah, I don't know. It works.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think so. It's also like going along with the he never gets a name thing where you could always project yourself upon the character of Max, like if you wanted to live out apocalypse fantasies for escapism purposes from the dystopia we live in.
Yeah. Yeah, I was watching the first one, and I was like, the real life is more dystopian than this.
Well, this is what, like, when I was watching it, I was like, they have so much infrastructure still, or trying to. Like, the first one is actually, to me, a really interesting study into the people who, like, try to maintain society when society collapses. Like, the cops are clearly still trying to maintain law and order. The hospital is trying to save people, but they just don't have the manpower, and they don't have the resources to do so. So it's like watching the slow decline of people who are desperately trying to keep society together.
I agree, and that's why I think the first one has sort of the best, like, world. I, like, greatly enjoyed, like, being in that sort of post-apocalypse, but it wasn't like a super bad apocalypse, and it's like very not very post, rather, I guess, it's like right after it, you know?
Just like immediately after the apocalypse happened, basically. Immediately after society starts to collapse. And I agree, I really like that world. I think I like both visions of the Mad Max universe, the Mad Max and the Road Warrior presented versions, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
We don't get a lot of like near apocalypse stuff either, because Mad Max, we should mention, opens with the title card like a few years in the future. Like, they never set a date, but it's always just a few years around the bend.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I mean, it was partially inspired by the 1973 oil crisis, when people were literally killing each other for barrels of gasoline.
Yeah.
So it's like, when it was made, it was very prescient, like, this is the future if we continue down this path where gasoline is precious and we're like killing each other for it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the first one. The first one is the most probably dialogue heavy, the most, I don't know, drama heavy, and the least action heavy.
Yeah, the first one is kind of like RoboCop, actually, like kind of contemplative almost about the state of humanity in a way.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, more so than the other two. At least more so explicitly than the other two.
Mm-hmm. Just to give some context to the film's release and success, I decided to look up what the highest grossing movie the year that the Mad Max released, and then what came out the same weekend. So the highest grossing movie of 1979 was Kramer vs. Kramer, which made $106.3 million on an $8 million budget, and also won both the Academy Award and, I believe, the Golden Globe for Best Movie of the Year. Which it makes the success of Mad Max quite impressive, because Mad Max made about $100 million that year off of a $350,000 budget. So it was not only almost the most profitable, the highest grossing, movie of the year, but it was by far the most profitable. Mm-hmm. The same weekend it was released with a movie called Hurricane, which was a box office flop. $4.5 million on a $22 million budget.
That's really bad, actually.
Yeah, so Mad Max didn't have much competition when it opened, really.
Even still, the first one. Even still, though, Mad Max was, for a long time, and I don't even know which movie overtook it, but for a long time, it was the biggest return on investment in movies, like, ever.
Yeah, it made 6 orders of magnitude back off its initial investment, which is just ridiculous to think about.
Yeah, it made its budget was like, what, 300,000 Australian dollars, which is, I think, less than what it would be American. And it made, hold on, I didn't write this down.
Made $100 million.
Yes. Yeah. So it was well over 100 times.
Yeah. I think, let's see.
And
I'm just looking up here the most profitable movies based on return on investment. And apparently, Deep Throat. Well, yeah, I guess it. So, yeah, if you look at return on investment, you can either look at it as like a percentage or as raw numbers. So Mad Max returned $100 million off 350,000, so it basically made $99 million.
mhm.
Deep Throat made a $25,000 budget, returned $22 million. So
So a lot.
yeah, it was also a porn movie. So
Yeah. I thought it was about the Watergate.
no, no, no. That's actually funny that you would think that because the Watergate informant was named after this movie.
Oh, yeah, I didn't know that.
This is actually the reverse situation.
But anyway, speaking of Mad Max making a lot of money, it made a lot of money in the U.S. where, surprisingly, I had no idea about this. It got an American dub.
Yeah, that was bizarre to me because it's not like it's Australian's another language.
No, no, and it's the reasoning that I found for this was that like the companies responsible for bringing it to the U.S. thought that Americans wouldn't understand some of the slang, which is true. Like looking back, like obviously we watched the original dialogue, which yeah, it's true. There were a few lines that I was like, oh, okay, like I didn't get exactly what they meant, but I mean, it's not like it's unintelligible.
It's true, but also intentional. I read that George Miller took inspiration from like Clockwork Orange because he wanted to show how the language starts to fragment into little communities as society breaks down because this intercommunication, this global interconnectedness we have is fragmenting. So that how language would start to evolve into something that would be very, very regional.
Mm-hmm.
And so he made it partially incomprehensible to the audience.
Yeah, but then they even did weird stuff like like for example, you know, in North America when you want to like I don't even know, I can't even describe it, but like North American people say hey, whereas like the rest of the Anglophone world says oi. And they even change stuff like that, which is like that's so weird to me at least. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that this idea is also brought to its not conclusion, but brought to I think what Miller really wanted to do with it in Beyond Thunderdome with the kids in the colony, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Because man, do I have some thoughts about that.
Well, first we have to get through Road Warrior, although Road
Right.
Warrior is potentially the most interesting of these three.
I think Road Warrior is my favorite, but
I disagree. I think Road Warrior is my least favorite.
and that's
But-
fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
It's the most action heavy is the thing, and as I always mention, I'm just not an action fan, I guess. I just tend to zone out action scenes.
Yeah, I mean, that's understandable. Because a lot of times action scenes don't serve to really like advance the plot. They just kind of tend to look cool.
No, and that's 100% what is at least subconsciously in my head when I'm watching this. Is like, well, whatever this scene amounts to is going to happen in the last 20 seconds of it, so I'll just start paying attention then. You know?
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of true with like the end scene in Road Warrior, where the end is when they reveal that the tanker was just a diversion.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think that there's like, I don't know, I appreciate the technical artistry involved in filming that entire chase scene.
Yeah, I do too.
That and the one at the end of Beyond Thunderdome, which was apparently more difficult to film.
Yeah, I do as well. Yeah.
Road Warrior, while I was watching it, I kind of saw it as like Magnificent Seven meets Mad Max, which is, kind of what it is.
Well, it's funny that you should bring that up because Miller listed 3 big inspirations for Road Warrior, and one of them was Kurosawa, which
Seven Samurai,
which
yeah.
is as we know, Magnificent Seven is a remake / appropriation of Seven Samurai. The other 2 inspirations he listed were really weird to me, and they were like very like, I don't know, surface level, like, yeah, I took philosophy 101 and here I am type thing, which he listed were Carl Jung, and
Okay, yeah.
and Joseph Campbell's Hero with 1,000 Faces.
Yeah, I saw that one.
I don't really see how the Jung stuff applies like at all.
I don't know much about Jungian philosophy, so I'm not gonna like comment on it.
Neither do I, to be perfectly honest. But like, I don't know. The little I do know, like, I couldn't line it up with anything in Road Warrior. But hey,
I mean, Road Warrior is a really interesting movie in my opinion because it's definitely trying to be like Magnificent Seven, Seven Samurai, like Mad Max. Max is the hero who shows up to save the day. But there's so many interesting side characters that are like, I want to know their story. And this is something that I read in the PhD dissertation, something I read somewhere else, something my roommate even mentioned, that like George Miller was very, especially on Road Warrior, was very like George Lucas about the whole thing, where he like came up with background stories for like everybody in the movie. And even though none of it gets on screen, they've all got like characters, fully fleshed out backgrounds that they're portraying in their characters on screen. Like, for example, Lord Humongous, I believe he said, was like a war veteran who had been bombed to hell in like the Vietnam War or something, and that's why he has to wear the mask, is because his face is all scarred from everything. And that I just think is like, it comes across on screen to me like this. The reason why I like Road Warrior is like everybody in this universe seems so like they've all got a story on how they got here, and that they all collided in this hellhole of a city that they're living in. And Max is just like an outside observer in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the first one, he's very much like the guy pushing the plot forward. I think that's partially intentional on Miller's part, that that's how it came out.
Yeah, I mean, the second one, Max is a very different, guy. He has been through what he went through in the first one, even though the second one is almost, it almost feels like a soft reboot, but it's not. It is just a direct sequel to the first one. I guess it is kind of a soft reboot, though, in that, like, it kind of resets the world. Not really, but I think you know what I mean. Like, it's just very, like, the setting is, like, very different. For one, they're now out in the desert. For two...
Actually,
for two, it's been a while, and for 3, the oil like based apocalypse / nuclear war potentially happened before the first one, but maybe happened between 1 and 2 as well. It's not really clear.
Right. We also get that opening monologue which explains the whole
the nuclear war, basically.
The nuclear war, and includes scenes from the first movie too, explaining like sort of the backstory on Max, because Road Warrior is told through this framing narrative of someone explaining the legend of the Road Warrior.
That's why I wasn't clear when the nuclear war happened, because they kind of interspliced it with like scenes from the first one. So I was like, oh, are they now saying like the nuclear war took place before the first? I didn't know. So
there's also like, I hate to keep making the same comparison to Sergio Leone, but it keeps being apt. Like, these 3 movies are a very Dollars trilogy feel to them, where they're all telling the story about someone who might be the same character, but we don't actually ever see any evidence that it is.
Yeah, that's true.
And even more so, like, Lee Van Cleef was in both For a Few Dollars More and Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, playing 2 completely different characters. Turns out, I saw... what's his name? Who plays the gyrocopter pilot in Mad Max 2. Bruce Spence shows up in Beyond Thunderdome as a pilot, and it's not the same character.
Yeah.
It's like Miller was like explicitly like they're not the same character, and that, you know, there's no set timeline to these. They may be the same character Max. We all assume they're the same character Max, the same way you assume Clint Eastwood plays the same character in the Dollars trilogy. And I think Road Warrior is the one that really drives this home because, like, again, we never hear Max's name. Max doesn't ever explain his story. He somehow acquired a dog. And he just wants to survive. He doesn't want anything to do with people.
Mm-hmm.
The dog, by the way, was actually named Dog on set. They rescued him from a pound in Australia like 2 days before he was supposed to be euthanized. And then the day before he was supposed to be euthanized, actually, just reading my notes, and then Dale Aspen, a stunt woman on the movie, adopted him when the movie finished production.
Yeah, that's cool. I was talking to this guy online, and he was talking about, I only bring this up because I could find no information about this, so it's not very well documented, you know. This guy said he went to this Mad Max stunt show in the early 80s, and one of the big draws of the show was not only seeing the stunts and the cars and stuff, but meeting Dog. And like petting Dog. Apparently, you know, what this guy was saying, this stunt show was like, it was just put on by the stunt people in the movie, and it was like, it wasn't a big thing, but they had Dog there somehow. And yeah, he's like, yeah, I went to it and it was cool. And yeah, I could find literally no information about this.
Was it like the Westworld stunt show?
I don't know.
Because not the Waterworld stunt show. Sorry. Yeah, that's right. What a mistake to make.
I thought that's what you meant. I was like, wait, Westworld?
Yeah, the Westworld, the Waterworld. Westworld is a very boring movie.
Okay, maybe I'm just dumb. I thought Westworld was like a show, wasn't it?
It's a TV. Okay, so it's a TV show now, but the TV show is based on the movie.
Okay.
And the movie was written by. Wow, I can't believe his name. Oh, Michael Crichton.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's all right. 1973.
And then Michael Crichton wrote and directed The Great Train Robbery a couple years later, I believe.
Yeah, and then Jurassic Park, like, which he's most famous for.
Well, he didn't direct it, but yeah,
he wrote it. He wrote the book.
I'm talking about like writing screenplays. He wrote. I think Westworld was his first like screenplay that he wrote. Then he did Great Train Robbery, late 70s, maybe early 80s. Anyway, That's neither here nor there.
Anyway, the visual, as we mentioned before, the setting is pretty much completely different from Mad Max 2, and so are the visuals of it. This is where, like, when people think about Mad Max, this is what they think about, of like the, you know, bikers in bondage gear with like the crazy hair and stuff like that. And that's from this movie. It's not from the first one.
Yeah, and apparently, like, the citizens of Broken Hill, Sydney, where they filmed it, just had to get used to just men walking around their city in bondage gear, like, basically 24/7 while they were filming the movie. Yeah. So, whoops. Apparently they sold the Falcon that they used for Max's, like, supercar at the end of the first movie, and they bought it back for the second movie, the same car. And then they had enough of a budget on the second movie to make a replica of the car, and that the replica was the one that got blown up when Max's car gets destroyed in the movie. And the original car, I think they kept and they sold for later on, and I think it's floating around at like there's a museum that has famous cars in movie history, and I think it made its way over there at some point. Because really, Mad Max Road Warrior is about the cars. And Max gets the coolest car at the end of the movie. I'm just going to say it. He got like the coolest car out of everyone with the weird like jet fuselage looking thing. Yeah,
I'm forgetting the name for it. There's a name for his car, but I forget what it is.
have no idea.
So 2, I guess, was as successful as the first one.
Yeah, so this is interesting. The second one, it's a little unclear how much money it actually made because the only, sorry, gross numbers we know are the numbers on how much theaters paid in rentals to rent the movie to show it, which was 35 million for Mad Max. For context, the year that Mad Max Road Warrior came out was a pretty big year for movies, so it had some stiff competition. Raiders of the Lost Ark came out that year and made $212 million on a $20 million budget. It was also the year that For Your Eyes Only and Superman 2 came out, as well as Chariots of Fire, which came out 2 days before Road Warrior did in the US, and which would go on to win Best Picture at the Academy Awards that year.
Mm-hmm.
So, stiff competition.
Mad Max 2 is still remembered. This movie has a massive legacy, and if you've ever watched movies or TV or if you've done anything related to media, you've experienced something that was influenced by Mad Max 2.
Yeah, and part of that is explained, I think, very well actually in the dissertation I read because, and this ties back into Mad Max 1, Miller explained that he wanted Mad Max 1 to be a montage movie rather than a mise-en-scene movie, which basically meant that he didn't want to show everything in real time. He wanted to montage through events. It was really interesting the way he described mise-en-scene as a film that records the incident without editorializing, which is interesting.
Yeah, especially because he hired a journalist to write his movie.
Exactly. But in the second movie, Road Warrior is the one where he really kind of perfects that montage style. For now, Fury Road is, I think, the epitome of that style because it is basically most of the movie. I would say 75% of that movie is one long chase. And Road Warrior is similar in that, as soon as they leave that compound, everything after that is basically high octane, very quick cuts, almost montage-esque, and that would go on to influence things for years. Yeah,
it's about half an hour, I think, in Road Warrior.
And the thing I really like about it is that it doesn't feel like half an hour, which is shocking. Because that's a third of the movie. Well, okay, fair. To me, it felt like 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. But that's a third of the movie. That's a third of the movie.
But it also had, though, the beginning, the first, I don't know, it wasn't as long, but the part where Max is kind of scoping out the gang, that also too was lengthy. That to me was a more interesting scene than the chase. Maybe I shouldn't admit that, but hey. That was probably my favorite scene from the movie. Just him on the little hill with the other dude and dog, scoping out the guys.
The gyrocopter pilot or whatever. The gyro pilot.
Oh
the gyro pilot.
Gyrocopter, I think, but
yeah, gyro pilot, whatever.
Yeah, so you almost can't overstate how influential this movie was. And that's worldwide too. The Fist of the North Star anime and manga is just Mad Max 2, but everyone knows Kung Fu. It's literally just Mad Max 2.
There's an entire Wikipedia page that's just the title of the Wikipedia page is Mad Max series legacy and influence in popular culture, and the Mad Max 2 section is a dozen or more bullet points, and that's not even all of them.
And whatchamacallit, Fallout, with the dog and that's just it's Mad Max 2, yeah.
It's also, Mad Max 2 is also the favorite movie of directors Guillermo del Toro, not the favorite, but one of their favorite, Guillermo del Toro, David Fincher, and Robert Rodriguez.
Yeah.
And James Cameron has mentioned that it influenced him when he was making movies.
Yeah. As we all know, James Cameron is secretly two people. Every movie that he's ever made actually had a small comma that nobody ever noticed between the James and the Cameron. It's actually James and Cameron. Yeah, Hideo Kojima
I
has
mean,
also stated that Mad Max 2 is one of his favorite movies, the creator of Metal Gear Solid, which is a series that I absolutely love.
yeah, I mean, I can see why. I think it's a very well made movie. Uh, you know, if you don't like action sequences, then sure, it's not for you. But I think that technically it's well made. It's very impressive to watch for like the time it was made, and like the story, what story there is like to me quite compelling. The one thing I disliked about it was the goddamn
Yeah,
kid,
the sort of feral child.
the feral child who like would have been fine if it was one of the kids of the people in the city, but there's a scene where he's there and someone's like, "Whose kid is this?" And I'm like, "Wait,
He's just kind of
what?"
there, yeah. Maybe that's where the Jungian stuff comes in. I don't really know. I mean, maybe he says something about, I don't know. Well, oh yeah, Jung is like the id and the ego and all that stuff, right? So, yeah, maybe that's where it fits in.
Yeah, I guess. I just remember saying, "Damn, I hate this kid," and my roommate going, "Well, you're gonna hate the third one then." And I'm like, "Great, great." I guess I should explain the reason why I disliked the kid in the second one, and he wasn't actually even that bad. But in general, I dislike kids in movies because, to me, and maybe this is going to be a hot take, maybe this is like a scowling hot take, but to me, screenwriters and I don't know, just writers in general, people who create stories will make characters kids because they need someone to make a stupid decision to move the plot forward, and they think that making them kids makes them immune to criticism for the decision being stupid. And I don't think that that's true. I don't think that like kids should be immune from criticism
Also,
for
kids
making
aren't
dumb
stupid.
decisions.
Like what? That's something that I frequently think about. Actually, is like as you get older, you start to think that kids are like dumb, but like they're not. And they're
Kids are very perceptive. They just don't know how to express the things that they
yeah,
see
maybe
or
I don't know.
know.
There's some
And I
kids.
think that's why they're perceived as stupid to me.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're not the same as adults, but like I don't know. There's
Yeah.
there's kids out there who I'm like, man, that kid's smarter than me, little shit. But
Yeah, sure.
actually, most
that's
of
just
them, I'd say that too, but not say it to their face, but like think about.
But that just reinforces my point that I think that like filmmakers, book writers will make characters kids because they think that making them a kid makes them immune to the criticism of like that's a dumb decision. And a lot of the times when I really dislike or hate the kid in the franchise, which is not always, I don't hate all kids, but the times when I do, it's because the kid makes a stupid decision whose like the only point of the decision is to move the plot forward, and you can find no justification for that decision anywhere else. And maybe this is a hot take, but that's why I just generally don't like kids in media anymore, because like so many of them are just there to make the dumb decision for everyone else. This even comes into play in Beyond Thunderdome, which we'll talk about in a few minutes.
Now, basically, I don't think I have anything else to say about two.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else either, actually, except that George Miller took acting classes when he moved to LA, and I thought that was a fun little anecdote.
Heck yeah. I wonder.
So,
There's probably not information out there about this. Maybe the dissertation went into it, but like, I wonder when George Miller stopped like being a doctor and just started being a director. You know?
I think it was around the time of Mad Max Road Warrior, based on my knowledge of his
Yeah.
chronology. But I believe that one of the stuntmen on Road Warrior, maybe it was Beyond Thunderdome, like injured themselves on set, and George Miller checked them out before they sent him to the doctor.
That's cool, I guess.
Before they sent him to the hospital, I guess. Although, actually, leads me into one more thing for Road Warrior, which was like reading this reminded me like how dangerous it must have been to film this damn movie, because at the end of the movie, Max is driving the tanker truck and he tips it at the very end. It tips over. The guy who drove the truck to perform that stunt, they basically disbarred him from eating for 12 hours before doing the stunt. And you might say, well, that's weird. Why would they do that? The reason why they did that was because if the stunt went wrong and they needed him to go into surgery, it reduced complications in the surgery for him to have an empty stomach.
Damn.
So, like, damn. But from what I read, like, the stuntmen, like, loved working on these movies because it was just, like, wild and crazy, and they got to do all these crazy things
they held
with
an
cars.
unofficial stunt show for the franchise. Like, yeah. Well, 3 has no shortage of stunts, too, so.
Right. Well, Byron Kennedy dies.
Freaking died in a helicopter crash, fitting for one of the creators of Mad Max.
I mean, is there a more metal way to go out?
Man, it's almost been a year since Kobe died in a helicopter crash.
Oh, yeah. When we're recording this.
Yeah, when we're recording it, it's been more than a year when you're listening to this.
Apparently, Miller, because of Kennedy's death, didn't really know if he wanted to go through with the movie, but eventually was convinced to do so. Especially since Warner Brothers gave him a bunch of money.
Yeah.
And gave him Final Cut privileges, which is rare. Final Cut privileges, for anyone in the audience who doesn't know, means that you as the director have the ability to approve or disapprove the very last cut of the movie before it goes to release or distribution. And in most cases also means that you yourself are allowed to re-edit the movie as part of the final cut. Yeah,
which didn't George Miller and maybe it was Byron Kennedy, or maybe it was James Coslin. Didn't they cut the first movie and just have that be like, wasn't their cut just what we saw?
Yeah, they cut it in Miller's kitchen apparently.
Yeah.
I read that going back to the silent film with sound thing, Miller cut the first movie at least once with no sound, like with the sound off, to make sure that the movie still made sense without any noise. So
yeah, cool.
There's a really interesting article about Beyond Thunderdome that ties back into Mel Gibson's alcoholism, and it's this wild article interviewing, I think, a stuntman on set, or they interviewed stuntmen and they took excerpts from like a Mel Gibson biography. But basically, one of the stuntmen was like, I'm just going to read this quote verbatim because no synopsis I can give of it is as good as just the quote. He goes, "Once we got to the desert, it was on for young and old. There was a lot of dope going around, a lot of cocaine, a lot of speed." And I was like, what? What? Apparently, Gibson's alcoholism got so bad on set that Miller had to declare it like a dry set. He was like, "You're not allowed to drink anything stronger than coffee on this set."
Yeah. Dang.
They also, the drugs got so bad because the people filming the movie would go into town every evening and hang out in town.
Bartertown. Freaking Bartertown. No, I'm just kidding.
They'd hang out in town, they'd go to the bar, and they would do drugs. And they would cause a ruckus. So, the production manager had to be like, "Look, if any of you is caught with drugs, we're kicking you, out of the production team. You're gone tomorrow." They had to start doing that because it was a problem.
But hey, they got Tina Turner on the movie.
Apparently, Jane Fonda was originally supposed to be in that role, but she passed on the movie, so they got Tina Turner instead.
Yeah, and okay, so Jane Fonda is not a singer, right?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
I don't believe so.
So if
she's an actress.
So if
predominantly,
if things had worked out as planned, they wouldn't have had, Jane
Great.
Fonda on the soundtrack, probably, like they did with Tina Turner.
Great. Wow. I'm just reading that Jane Fonda also got blacklisted in Hollywood.
God.
Except she got blacklisted because she was heavily anti-Vietnam.
No. Wow. Wow.
Anyway, okay,
Yeah,
weird.
okay.
Apparently Tina Turner couldn't drive stick shift, so they had to modify the cars.
Yeah, I read that too. I read that in an article that also claimed other things that weren't true, probably.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was the Screen Rant
Yeah,
article.
Screen Rant has like I think it's a recent article. It was published like mid 2020. I believe it's like 10 things you didn't know about Mad Max, and one of those things is something that was like every other instance of it that I saw on every other site was like mentioned it, but said that it was just an unfounded rumor that was debunked, which was that Mel Gibson showed up to his audition for Mad Max with like a black eye or something like that, or a bruised face. And Screen Rant posited this as true. Every other site I found said it's just a rumor and has been denied. So make of that what you will.
Yeah, my roommate came to me with the same story, and he's like, there's this old anecdote that I think a lot of people like agree is probably not true, but it was basically that they cast Mel Gibson because he already looked the part because he had been in a bar fight the day before the audition.
Yeah, Screen Rant though says it's true, so it must be. No.
I've been skeptical of a lot of Screen Rants.
I've been
articles
skeptical.
as of late.
I've been skeptical of like anything on the first page or even second and third page of Google for like years. So, because most of it's like clickbait.
True. There's a 40-minute video that's a behind the scenes documentary with interviews from Miller and everything about Beyond Thunderdome that I recommend people check out. That goes over a lot of this and talks about like how they did the stunts and also mentions that there was a stunt too over the top that they couldn't put it in the movie, so they had to cut it completely.
Which was what?
They had a car like ramping over the train, I think, is what it was, if I remember the description correctly.
Yeah, that's cool.
But Miller was like, you don't think like too over the top and Mad Max would be in the same sentence, but it's true. We had a stunt that was too over the top and we could have put it in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I really liked the third one, I think. Well, not really liked. I just liked it more than Road Warrior.
The third one has a weird, campy, like, place in the public consciousness. There are a lot of references to the Thunderdome and 2 men enter, 1 man leaves, like, everywhere.
Yeah, I think once at the beginning of the movie, I really wasn't into it. I think once Max was exiled and, once he was sent into the desert, that's when I was like, okay, I'm kind of enjoying this now.
Wow, I had the opposite.
Yeah, I think it all. I mean, this sort of thematic thread that starts in Road Warrior, I think, culminates here with the Max, I guess, going to the colony of the children, who, they're kind of looking for this past era that has been extinguished by war and by conflict and stuff, and Max shows up there, and they think he's this. He thinks Captain Walker, who's there sort of like, I don't know, he's their prophet, he's their, whatever, he's this guy that they're looking forward to returning. Max is like, no, I'm not Captain Walker, and, you guys are just going to have to accept that these images you have of these cities, like, that's in the past. This is your home. This is it. This world that, like, has been created by, like, all this meaningless conflict and war. Like, this is it. But then, obviously, by the end of the movie, which is why this is part of the reason, I guess, why I was like, man, this ending is like really innocuous. And because you were like, the ending sucks. And people online or throughout, the past have also said like, yeah, the ending for this movie freaking sucks. But like, I don't know. I just thought it was like the most tame ending ever because it's like, it just touches on exactly that where like they go back to society and like, yeah, maybe it doesn't make exact sense in the, in the world of the movie, but it makes thematic sense that they'd go back to, what people were able to create by cooperation rather than competition, which are cities. and things that are like perceived as great works of art, like the Sydney Opera House, which we see on screen destroyed but still standing. So yeah, I mean, it kind of all just tied together with like Beyond Thunderdome. Yeah, within the first 30 minutes, they physically go beyond Thunderdome, but of course they also go beyond what Thunderdome is, which is like 2-1, which is just this arena for competition. So like it all kind of clicked at the end for me.
Well, you're entitled to your opinion.
Of the stunned silence.
To me, I guess the reason, in my mind, the movie should have ended with them in the plane, and it should have ended when Max was walking down the road, and that would have been the perfect ending because it left like questions as to what the kids did and what was going on. To me, it didn't make sense because, yeah, okay, it's cool, like, we're going back to society, we're building cities and everything. That's the same thing that Auntie Entity tried to do, Tina Turner's character. But I think the naivete of the kids at the end of the movie is what makes it, like, frustrating. Because the world that is set up earlier in the movie, because sure, the movie's bookended by the new city, the city of the apocalypse versus the old city that we used to live in. But the world that gets set up in the first 30 minutes is that people just hate each other now, and that civilization just can't exist. Like, that's not a thing that can exist. And so the end, to me, I don't know if this is why other people dislike it. To me, I disliked it because it just felt very at odds with the rest of the movie. Like, I get that it's supposed to be about like hope for the future and that like they can rebuild, but that feels like it wasn't set up early enough in the movie. And the kids also are set up to be very naive. We hear the creation myth, but the longer the creation myth goes on, the more kind of absurd and incorrectly interpreted it is. And to me, the more you kind of realize that the kids don't know anything, they don't understand the world beyond their river, which is also the other thing is like when cities are built, where do they get built? On rivers. So to me, if you wanted to do this bookend with them building a new city, the best place to do it would be somewhere that's like the only source of water in 1,000 miles because of the nuclear war.
Yeah, that's true, but I did like the sort of figure of like, they're bringing back the past and like this sort of past era where people were more cooperative and were able to, obviously there's bad shit about cities, perhaps more bad than good, but like it was able to, people were able to create these things, not just cities, but create like, artwork and like, achieve like scientific feats or whatever, technological feats, do a podcast, for example.
Sure.
Through like the cooperation that now in this post-apocalyptic world increasingly doesn't exist anymore. So I kind of like that sort of I don't know what you call it, symbol or figure of like returning back to the past, and it kind of not bookends, but like it kind of Max sort of, even if it's not like super big focus of the movie, I think sort of has this arc almost where he goes like, no, you guys need to give up on the past. That was all in the past. You need to just kind of, here's your home. You need to live here and build here. But, there was something valuable in the past after all. So, yeah, it's kind of nice. Warms the heart a little bit. Warms after all the death and destruction.
I mean, sure, I agree that there's something nice in the past. But to me, the three movies, Beyond Thunderdome especially, set up the idea that like that past, that living in those cities, that dependence on gasoline and technological advancements is what brought us to this apocalypse. Like that could not have happened without the cities. And there's good in the past, sure, but the way they portray it in the movie to me is like we should go completely back to that. And to me, that just seems like, why would you do that? That's how you got into this situation in the first place. Like, use the good aspects of the past to create something new That's how I would have ended it. But, you know, we probably won't
Yeah,
agree
but
on
I
this.
almost think that that's exactly what the ending of the movie is what you're describing. But anyway, I mean, I think we're now talking about how they work as a trilogy, which is perfect because that's what we were planning on doing. Which is, I mean, I gotta say, like, I'm a little torn on how well they work as a trilogy. And I didn't think I would come in saying this, but, like, not badly, I don't think, you know?
No, I think they work somewhat decently as a trilogy. They do feel all very thematically different. Also, the third one is just Dune, but make it Mad Max. Just going to throw that out there.
The third one also has, like,
And
the scene that's, like, ripped from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Like...
yes. I was watching it and it's like this just wants to be Indiana. Like they want Max to be Indiana Jones. Which, like, speaking of which, Beyond Thunderdome came out the same year as Back to the Future, which came out literally the week before Beyond Thunderdome, so it had some stiff competition during its theatrical run.
Yeah, it didn't do as well as the first two, I believe.
I mean, it was a tough year to compete because it was the year that Back to the Future, Rocky IV, Rambo 2, The Color Purple, Jewel of the Nile, and The Goonies all came out. So pretty much every single one of those is like still a beloved question mark. I hesitate to say that because I included Rocky IV and Rambo 2
Jewel
in that
Nile,
list.
That Robert Zemeckis movie? No?
No, that's Romancing the Stone.
And that's Jewel of the Nile is a sequel to
Jewel
that, right?
I thought of the yeah, I think it's the sequel. Yeah, it's the sequel.
And he didn't direct the sequel.
It's not directed. No, he didn't.
Okay.
It's directed by Louis Teague.
Okay. Gotcha. Louis Teague. No idea who that is, but gotcha.
Same, but you know. He's directed a bunch of things I don't recognize.
By Jack Nietzsche. That's an eye-catching name.
That was watching the first two movies. It was like music by Brian May, and I'm like, is that the Brian May of Queen? It's not the Brian May of Queen. I thought it was, and I didn't
bother looking it up until I looked it up afterwards. But like as I was watching the movies, I just assumed that it was.
Same. And the third one is done by Maurice Jarre, who won the Academy Award for Best Score for Dr. Zhivago. This is a far cry from his work on that and Lawrence of Arabia, which I've seen. But anyway, I think they work well as a trilogy. And I mean, I made this comparison earlier, but it's definitely like a Dollars trilogy kind of situation, though, like where we don't really necessarily know that this is the same Max in all three movies. Especially since they never call him Max. Actually, no, I don't think they call him Max in the second.
They do have the flashbacks in the second one, and they're like, "This is a story of a man who like." And while they're saying that, it's like images from the first movie, so it's like, yeah.
It's kind of, it's like how For a Few Dollars More is a direct sequel to
Fistful of Dollars.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying though. It's like it's up for debate. And it's like, it's even, you know, you look back at the three movies and it's like, does it even matter if it's the same person? He's turned into this like legend. Like Max could be anyone who says their name is, but I don't know. Not really.
It's kind of like it's a situation where like everybody's got their hero and it's Max, and everybody has their image of Max in their head. And multiple kind of stories about different people morphed into being all stories about Max, because like Max becomes just a euphemism, I guess, for like hero.
Yeah, and that's where the hero with 1,000 faces like research comes into play, where he's this, you know, hero figure who keeps kind of repeating throughout different periods and different places.
Yep.
Oh, there was something actually I forgot about the first one. We mentioned how Road Warrior was influential, but like the scene at the end of Mad Max 1, basically the ending scene, where Max is about to burn, whatever the guy's name was, I forgot, alive, but he gives him the chance. He gives him the saw to saw his leg off. Was hugely influential apparently, and was there's a scene in Watchmen that is just that Rorschach gives the guy a saw in the same exact way Max does, and the guy's about to be burned alive. The entire Saw franchise, according to James Wan and Lee Wannell, was inspired by that scene. So,
yeah. I believe that, because I'm pretty sure there's a scene in the first movie where a guy is given a hacksaw and he starts sawing his leg off, and everyone's like, why didn't you just saw through the damn handcuffs? But anyway.
Well, the reason for that in Mad Max is that, like, maybe Max is lying. Like, who knows? Max could just be lying, but, like, he says, like, the gasoline is going to take however long to reach the lighter, and
right.
And you're going to die. It'll take you less than that amount of time to saw off your leg, but more to saw through the handcuffs. So that's where the movie ends. I really like the ending of the first one, even though it feels a bit anticlimactic. Just because it's one of those endings that, like, kind of almost recontextualizes the movie, and you're like, oh, that's what it was leading up to, not necessarily like revenge, but like the evils of revenge. Like, it wasn't leading up to like a satisfying revenge. It was leading up to like this guy like going off the deep end and like showing the evils of revenge and stuff like that. So, it's interesting.
It's also part of the key to that movie to me, how he gets revenge on people who affected his life in reverse order. He like kills the people who killed his wife and child first before killing the person who killed Goose, ostensibly killing him, which is the opposite order to how they affected him, basically. So.
Yeah, that even like, yeah, you talk about like, there's in there's like this, it's not romanticization, I wouldn't say, but like, there are these, it posits that there are these like bits of the past that you would want to reclaim and to build a better future. And then in one, it's sort of like, Max it's as if he's going kind of back in time, and he's just digging, he's just digging himself deeper into this hole of like hatred and revenge and violence. And as he's doing that, he's going back through, the reverse order of what happened to him. So I don't know. It's cool. It's interesting. There's definitely more of these movies than meets the eye, and I always enjoy that, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of interesting subtext and things going on with these movies. Always more to pick at, too.
Always more to saw through and crash into, and yeah.
kind of thought that was where I was going. But just like one last thing on the like, does it even matter if it's the same person? Like the fourth movie, Fury Road, makes no timeline reference to any of the movies, so it's entirely possible that it's after Beyond Thunderdome. It's also entirely possible that it's between Thunderdome and Road Warrior, and it would fit perfectly in either of those locations. And does it matter? Who knows? But I think that's also particularly interesting. Like, these stories can also kind of be told almost in any order.
Yeah. Except, like, yeah, Fury Road is before
the first
Mad
one would
Max
have to be
1.
first. Yeah, okay, the first one is, like, definitely first, but, like, the subsequent ones, you can almost put them in any order, and it works.
Yeah.
Almost. And I think on that topic, I've talked out of Mad Max. So, obviously no emails that I know of yet, but looking forward to this season of Triple Play. And if you would like to email us about any of the movies we have coming up, or your thoughts on our experimental new format, remember to check the show notes for more behind-the-scenes information if that's your jive. You can email us at thedoctor@decadvegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on everything I just said. You can find us on YouTube at Decadent Vegetable. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, pretty much everywhere at Triple Play, a movie trilogy podcast. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us out on Facebook, Trust Your Doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast, and follow us on Twitter. And next time, we're going to be watching Beverly Hills Chihuahua, but until then, the end.